So this is the second part and the final part of the build your own GUIs. Hopefully it'll make a lot of sense to you.
So the first panel that we're looking at that goes onto our content pane is the north panel. It's at the top. It's the pink one. We're going to look at how to set the layout for the panel, how to instantiate the components for the panel, and then of course adding the components to the panel. So this is what it looks like. It's just this little thin pink bar, and we are, I don't know if you can see or not, but you should be able to see that it has kind of a black border all the way around. And so we're going to just create a line border and make it black. So you can see that that's the second line of code there. And we are going to set the layout as a flow layout. The components that we're instantiating are a J button, a J combo box, and a J text field. So those three things, and that's it, are going on our north panel. The J combo box is the most interesting. What we need is to create an array of strings, and those are the possible things that you can pick from the combo box. So if you click on that little down arrow, you'll get the colors blue, red, yellow, purple, and pink. And then when you instantiate the J combo box, it gets the string array as input to the constructor for the J combo box. The other thing we're doing with the J combo box is we're going to set the selected item to purple. So we're going to start off with purple. Our J text field is just going to say field, but you can put anything in there you want. And the J button that we had at the beginning just says press me. So those are the three things in those 5 lines of code. Then you add those 3 things to the north panel. The center panel, we're going to do a lot more because I wanted you to see a little bit more with borders. And so we're going to, this is the orangey one that's in the middle. We are going to set the layout, and it's now a grid layout. We're going to give the panel an empty border. So this piece around all of these buttons around the outside would not exist if we didn't give it an empty border, even though in the grid layout I am spacing the buttons. I'm giving a border around the buttons. It doesn't give the outside border for the panel. We're going to instantiate all of those buttons. There's what, 1, 2, 3 by, so there's 12 buttons. And we're going to do that very simply using a nested for loop. And we are going to change the look of the 2 of the buttons. So this one has kind of a beveled look, and this one has different colors, and it has quite a different look to it as well. Then we're going to add all those buttons to our panel, and then we'll move on to the next thing. But for now, we're going to look at the code. So how do we get all this to happen? First of all, we're setting the border and create empty border 15, 15, 15, 15. That's the number of pixels around each of the 4 sides. The preferred size of the actual panel, I'm going to make 150 by 100. And again, that second number here is going to adapt to whatever I've made the entire J-frame to be. And the layout, see where it says 4, 3, so that's 4 rows, 3 columns. The 20 and 20 is the number of pixels width-wise and then height-wise between the buttons, not counting the border because it doesn't give an outside border. So that's the first part where we're styling the whole panel. Then we're going to have this nested for loop with an array of buttons, and we're going to just instantiate them using the nested for loop because I don't want to sit there and do 12 lines all the same. I'm just going to do it in a loop. We're going to pick one of the buttons in particular, the one at row 2, column 1, so 0, 1, 2, column 0, 1, this one here, colors, and we're going to give it a new color. And again, I went online and I found a really pretty pink color. I'm sure you guys really appreciate that. And that's the RGB net values to create that color. I don't need to actually create the color to use anywhere else because I'm just using it in one spot. The foreground color where I'm writing the word colors is white, and I'm going to set the text on it. So if you want to change text on buttons or on any components, just put set text and you can do it. This piece of code here, these few lines, that's how I get the bevel border. So you can take a look at that. And then at the end, again, I don't want to go through 12 lines of adding buttons, so I'm going to use a nested for loop. So we talked about grid layout. You can reference this slide if you are setting your own grid layout. If you forget what the numbers are for, you don't have to have 2020 here. You can just go with 4-3 or whatever numbers you want. Okay, west panel, the one on the left. We're going to do 3 things. I hope you're starting to feel like that's kind of standard here. Set the layout for the panel, instantiate the components, add the components. So we are going to set the layout. I don't know if any of you guys can figure out what it is. We're going to instantiate checkboxes and radio buttons, and then we're going to put them on. Okay, so the checkboxes are different from radio buttons. Radio buttons, if I select a different selection here, the one that's already selected goes away. But with checkboxes, I can check several or all of them or none of them. Lots of code here. I'm not going to go through this whole thing. We're going to get this layout over here by doing a box layout, west panel, box layout, y-axis. Y-axis is vertical. Okay, this is how you create checkboxes. You can look through it and you can see you instantiate the checkbox, you set the mnemonic, so it can detect if there's a key event. False, false, false. There's one true here, and that's the one that's selected, which is number 4. The rest are false, which means don't show them as selected at the beginning. Radio buttons, you can look through the code again yourself. I put the link in here of when I looked up radio buttons. You can check the link as well. Adding the radio buttons to a button group links them together, and then we take the components that we created and we add them to our panel. So in here we are adding each radio button separately, even though it's on a button group. You can't just add the button group, you have to add the radio button separately. And notice I have a J label here with nothing in it. That's a spacer. If without the J label, the checkboxes and the radio buttons would be one right after the other. I wanted a space between them, so I made a J label, I added it to my panel, and it just spaces them out. Okay, now the east panel on the right-hand side, I want you to see the difference between the text box and the text area. But again, we're doing 3 things. Set the layout, instantiate the components, add the components. So I am making a title border for my panel, so you can see how that's done. It's also a grid layout, 3 rows, 1 column. I'm putting space, but the 30 is kind of meaningless because there isn't another column. So there's a 0 between the rows, so there's, between the rows, so there's no space really between each of the components. Creating them, I put a \n here in the text area because text areas, unlike text fields, allow for more than 1 line of text. So 2 lines, I can say that if I did that above, I wouldn't get 2 separate lines. So that's the big difference, and also the way it's presented on the screen. So that's what I'm telling you here. These are text fields, The bottom one is a text area. It looks different, and the text fields, I can only put one line of code. So all this extra space is kind of meaningless. Now the south panel. Again, we're doing three things. We're going to set the layout, we're going to instantiate the components, and we're going to add the components. What does the code look like for that? This one I'm creating a titled border as well, so that looks the same as what you saw last. It's a box layout on the x-axis, so it's kind of nice. Each field that each component that we're putting there gets its own size. And instantiate them, add them. Hopefully you're getting the idea. You're going to be doing this in your individual projects, but I'm not going to go through this right now. I just want you to look at the GUI and decide how you want it to look and start seeing if you can put the code together to get what you want. Remember, JPanels, if they have areas in them that you have defined based off of the layout, you can put another JPanel in that area, or you can put a component in that area. But you can't put group components into one area unless you put a JPanel there first. So have some fun with it. See if you can come up with something that is useful for your individual database project, and start playing.